What would you do if a dying mountain man offered you everything he owned, but only if you gave him an heir? Would you walk away, or would you take the only chance life had left for you? The mountains of the Wyoming Territory didn't give their secrets easily, but the people who lived in their shadow knew this much. Life could change in a single moment. Emma Collins never expected her life to shift in such a dramatic way. She was a humble young woman who worked quietly at the Bear Creek trading post, sewing buckskin garments and cooking meals to keep herself and her sick aunt alive. The days were long, the work was heavy, and the pay was barely enough to buy flour and coffee. But Emma kept going because she had no other choice. On a late afternoon in early April, the sun settled behind the tall peaks. Shadows stretched across the dusty yard between cabins. Voices rose and fell as trappers, voyageurs, and hunters argued over the price of pelts. Horses stamped their hooves in the corral. Smoke drifted from a dozen chimneys, blending with the smell of stew and tanned hides. For most folks at Bear Creek, it was just another busy day of the spring trading season. For Emma, everything was falling apart. Inside her small one-room cabin, her Aunt Ruth coughed so hard it shook the bed frame. Emma had grown used to the sound, but today it felt heavier than before. She wiped her aunt's forehead with a damp cloth. Ruth looked up at her with tired eyes that seemed older than the mountains themselves. "You're working yourself to the bone," Ruth whispered. "And for what? That post owner will throw you out the minute he decides you're not worth the trouble." Emma swallowed hard. She knew it was true. Silas Henderson, the trading post owner, had been kind enough to let them stay, but his patience was thin. Emma did all she could, cooking meals for travelers, sewing until her fingers ached, hauling water in the cold, but it was never enough to make her feel safe. Outside, the noise grew louder. The spring brigade had arrived. Dozens of trappers were coming down from the high country with months' worth of furs. It was the busiest, wildest time of year, and among them was the one man everyone spoke about, Nathaniel Bridger. Emma heard his name before she saw him. The traders whispered it like they were speaking of a legend. He was the mountain man who had survived storms that killed other men, the man who carried scars from grisly attacks, the man who lived so deep in the wilderness that whole winters passed without another soul laying eyes on him. There were stories of him walking miles through blizzards with a broken leg, fighting off wolves with nothing but a knife, and crossing mountain passes in storms so fierce that even the trees bowed to the wind. They said he had caches of furs hidden across the high country, worth more than some eastern bankers made in a lifetime. Emma had always heard the stories, but she had never imagined she'd speak with him. Not until Silas Henderson called her into his private room that evening. "Emma," Silas said, rubbing the back of his neck, "Mr. Bridger here wants a word with you." She froze when she saw him. Nathaniel Bridger stood tall despite the weight of years and the wilderness carved into his face. His beard was streaked with gray, his shoulders broad, his eyes sharp, yet behind that sharpness was something else. Pain. A deep, quiet pain that made him seem older than he should have been. He nodded toward the chair. "Please sit down, Miss Emma." She obeyed and kept her hands folded in her lap. Silas slipped out, closing the door. Nathaniel stood for a long moment without speaking. Then he finally said the words that would change her life forever. "I went to see the doctor in Fort Laramie. He told me the truth. I have a growth in my liver. A bad one. I have a year left, maybe less." Emma felt her heart stop. She didn't know what to say. The mountain man breathed in slowly. "I've lived harder and longer than most men in these mountains. But I have a problem. I have no one to leave my land, my cabin, my fur caches, or my fortune to. I don't want it falling into strangers' hands." Emma stared at him, unsure where this was going. Nathaniel continued, his voice steady but quiet. "I need an heir, a legitimate one, someone to inherit everything I've built." Then he looked straight into her eyes. "And I want you to be the mother." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "I'm offering you marriage," he said, "a year by my side, a child. And when I die, everything I own, all of it, becomes yours. Your aunt will have the best care money can buy." You'll never worry about survival again." Emma's hands shook. "You don't know anything about me," she whispered. "I know enough," Nathaniel said. "I know you work hard. I know you take care of your aunt. I know life hasn't given you much, and I know I can give you a future." The room felt small. Her heart pounded. This man was offering her a life she had never dared imagine, but at a price she never expected. That night, Emma lay awake, listening to her aunt's labored breathing, torn between fear and hope. She had no love for Nathaniel, no dreams of a life in the mountains. But she had no other future, no protection, nowhere to go if Ruth died. The next morning, after another violent coughing fit, Ruth grabbed Emma's hand. "He's offering you life," she whispered. "Take it." And with those words, Emma stepped toward a fate she never saw coming. The next morning, Emma found Nathaniel Bridger sitting on a bench behind the trading post, smoking a pipe and watching the mist rise off Bear Creek. He didn't look like a man begging for life. He looked like a man who had already accepted death and simply wanted to set his affairs in order. That quiet certainty scared Emma more than anything. She stepped toward him, her palms sweating. "Mr. Bridger," she said softly. He looked up, his dark eyes steady. "Have you made your decision?" Emma swallowed hard. "Yes, I'll marry you, but I have conditions." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then he nodded. "Fair enough, name them." "My aunt must have the best care possible, a real doctor, good medicine, a warm room." "Your word on that." "You have it," Nathaniel said without hesitation, "and I will raise the child with kindness. I won't live the way some trappers do, wild and harsh. I want a real home for the baby." "I wouldn't ask for anything else," he answered. She took a breath. "Then yes, I'll be your wife." Nathaniel stood, taller than she remembered, a solid figure shaped by the wilderness. "We'll leave in a week," he said. "There's a long journey ahead." That same day, they were married in the trading post's main room. The ceremony was brief, just a preacher passing through, Silas Henderson and a few trappers as witnesses, and Ruth propped up in a chair, her face pale but determined to see Emma wed. Emma wore her one clean dress. Nathaniel wore a washed buckskin shirt. They stood side by side, strangers tied by necessity. "You may kiss the bride," the preacher said. Nathaniel didn't kiss her. He simply bowed his head in respect. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a strange mix of relief and sadness. That week passed in a blur. Nathaniel paid for a doctor from Fort Laramie to examine Ruth. He paid in gold coins for the medicine, for new blankets, for a warm room in Silas's main house. Emma visited Ruth every day, memorizing the lines of her face, knowing deep down that this was goodbye. When the morning came to leave, Ruth squeezed Emma's hand. "Go," she whispered. "Live the life God is handing you." Emma fought her tears as she climbed onto the gentle brown mare Nathaniel had saddled for her. Nathaniel rode ahead on his Appaloosa stallion, Windrunner, leading 3 pack mules heavy with supplies. His movements were calm, certain. He knew exactly where to place each footstep. The mountains rose around them like giants. The first days were a whirlwind of new lessons. Nathaniel taught her how to cross icy streams without falling, how to keep her bedroll dry even in sudden storms, how to listen to the wind. They camped by creeks and meadows where the air smelled of pine and cold stone. At night, Nathaniel cooked their meals and pointed out the constellations, old friends he had followed for years. Emma watched him quietly. He spoke plainly, without showing pain, but she had seen him wince more than once. The illness was real. The clock inside him was ticking. On their 3rd day, they climbed higher into country Emma had only ever heard about. Rugged ridges, tall pines, and wind-carved cliffs. Nathaniel moved with ease, his horse sure-footed, as if it had memorized every rock along the path. Emma struggled to keep up, but refused to complain. At a quiet lake surrounded by cliffs, Nathaniel caught trout with a simple line and hook. Emma watched him handle the fish with practiced skill. "You don't talk much," she observed. He glanced up. "Talking never kept a man alive out here." "Then why did you choose me?" she asked. He paused. "You're steady. Strong. You don't scare easy. And you care for your aunt the way some folks care for gold." He looked back at the water. "That tells me more about a person than anything they say." His honesty surprised her, but it was the next part that struck deeper. "And maybe," he added quietly, "you deserved a chance at a better life." That night, a storm rolled over the mountains. Thunder cracked like cannon fire. Emma sat rigid by the fire, terrified the cabin of canvas and poles would blow apart. Nathaniel noticed and sat beside her. "These mountains sound fierce," he said, "but they don't break easily. Neither will you." His presence eased her fear, and for the first time since leaving Bear Creek, she felt safe. On the 5th day, they encountered a crow hunting party, 5 warriors on painted horses. Emma froze, but Nathaniel greeted them as old friends. They laughed, embraced him, and welcomed Emma warmly. Their leader, Spotted Elk, studied her closely, then said in careful English, "Strong woman, good for this land." Emma wasn't sure whether to smile or tremble. The 7th day brought them to Nathaniel's cabin, a sturdy log home nestled in a valley of towering pines. A clear spring bubbled nearby. Smoke stains on the chimney told stories of 1,000 fires. This wasn't a shack, it was a home. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered. Nathaniel nodded. "It's yours now, too." Inside, the cabin was warm and orderly. Deer antlers hung on the walls. Furs lay on the floors. Books were stacked neatly beside the hearth. Nathaniel moved through the space with the ease of a man who had built every inch by hand. Emma stood quietly, letting the reality settle into her bones. This would be her life. This man. This wilderness. This uncertain future. And that night, as Nathaniel fulfilled the arrangement that bound them, Emma lay awake long after he slept, listening to the mountain wind outside the cabin. This wasn't a dream, and it wasn't a nightmare. It was something far more complicated. She was married to a dying man she barely knew. And yet, something about him made her feel safer than she ever felt at the trading post. Something told her this journey would change everything. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. The first weeks in the mountains were the hardest Emma had ever lived, but they were also the most eye-opening. Each day revealed something new about Nathaniel Bridger, something she couldn't have learned from the stories whispered at the trading post. He rose before dawn every morning, even when pain made him move slower than he liked. He checked traps in the nearby streams, brought home fresh meat, repaired tools, and taught her everything she needed to know to survive alone in the high country. He showed her how to cut wood so it burned longer, how to read animal tracks, how to clean a rifle, how to store food safely so bears wouldn't come sniffing around. Emma listened, learned, practiced, and began to understand that this wasn't a temporary life. This was the only life she and Nathaniel had left together. And slowly, almost quietly, the cold arrangement between them began to change. One night, a fierce thunderstorm rolled down from the peaks. Lightning cracked like gunfire. Wind slammed against the cabin walls. Emma trembled, sitting upright in bed, certain the roof would tear away. Nathaniel came and sat beside her. "This cabin has stood through storms stronger than this," he said in a calm voice. "It won't fall." Emma leaned into him without thinking, and he didn't pull away. They sat like that through the worst of it, her head on his shoulder, his hand steady on hers. When the thunder quieted, he stayed beside her instead of returning to his own bedroll. After that night, something shifted between them. Nathaniel became gentler, more open. Emma found herself watching for his return from the trap lines, listening for his steps on the porch. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. He told her stories about hunting in blizzards, of crossing mountain passes alone, of the Shoshone woman he had once loved. Emma told him about her childhood, her parents, the things she hoped for but never expected to have. By late June, Emma felt the first signs of pregnancy, morning sickness, exhaustion, tenderness she couldn't ignore. But she waited to be sure. When she finally told Nathaniel, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset turn the sky gold. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, "I think I'm carrying your child." He froze. A deep stillness settled over him, and for a moment she feared he would turn away. But then his eyes softened. "Are you certain?" "Yes." Quote. He reached for her hand. His voice broke slightly when he spoke. "Thank you, Emma. Thank you for giving me more than I ever hoped for at the end of my life." That night was the first time he held her like a husband. Not out of duty, but out of tenderness. Summer faded into fall, and Nathaniel's pain grew worse. He moved slower. His breath came shorter. Some mornings he couldn't rise at all, but he continued to teach her everything he knew: how to tan hides, how to find the hidden caches he had buried across the mountains, how to trade with the crow. "We don't have a full year," he admitted one night by the fire. "I can feel it. I need you to be ready." "I will be," Emma whispered, though fear pressed hard against her chest. When the first heavy snow fell, Nathaniel's condition worsened. He tried to hide it, but there were moments when he had to grip the table to stay standing. He slept more, ate less. Emma cared for him, fed him broths, kept the cabin warm, and whispered to their unborn child at night, telling the baby about the father who loved them both. On a quiet morning in early September, Nathaniel told her everything: where every fur cache was hidden, the signs he carved into trees to mark trails, which ridgelines to avoid after storms. He held her hand and said, "When I'm gone, you'll have everything you need. You're stronger than you think." In early winter, as snow piled high around the cabin, Emma went into labor. She worked through the pain alone because Nathaniel was too weak to stand. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. When the baby finally came, a strong, healthy boy, Emma cried from relief and exhaustion. She wrapped the newborn in blankets and carried him to Nathaniel's bedside. Nathaniel's eyes opened. He reached out with trembling hands. "Let me see him," he whispered. Emma placed the baby in his arms. Their son fell quiet instantly, staring up at his father. Nathaniel cried openly. "Jacob," he said. "His name is Jacob." Emma nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "Jacob Bridger." Nathaniel kissed his son's forehead. Then he looked at Emma with a gaze full of love he had never spoken aloud until this moment. "You gave me everything," he whispered. That night, as the fire burned low, Nathaniel Bridger took his last breath. He died with his son in his arms and Emma holding him close. Emma buried him in the spring, on a hillside overlooking the valley, his favorite place. She carved a wooden marker with her own hands and tended his grave with love. The years that followed proved she had learned every lesson Nathaniel taught her. She became a mountain woman in her own right, strong, respected, unafraid. She raised Jacob with stories of his father, taught him how to track game, how to survive storms, how to love the mountains the way Nathaniel had. And as the boy grew, he showed the same calm courage, the same steady spirit, the same unshakable heart. Emma lived the life Nathaniel had given her, a life she never dreamed she could have. A life built on courage, sacrifice, and a love that had grown quietly in the shadow of the mountains. And every year she visited the grave on the hillside, held Jacob's hand, and whispered, "Thank you, Nathaniel, for choosing me, for loving me, for giving us everything." When Jacob grew strong enough to stand tall beside her, Emma understood something she never expected. Nathaniel's legacy didn't end with his death. It was alive in Jacob, it lived in her, and it would live in these mountains forever.